Are we angry enough about our future? Because as grateful as I am to be here, I'm honestly frustrated. Frustrated by the challenge that we face, and as youth, the role that higher education has to play in that. Well, fittingly, we are in an institution, so I want us to recognize that we all have the privilege to be here because of the unfortunate reality of those who couldn't make it. So that places great responsibility upon us who do make it in. And that's what I want to speak to today. So I'm here to speak about three things following with our agenda. Firstly, what I believe is the biggest challenge that we face as a society. Secondly, the role that higher education must play if we are to face that challenge. And thirdly, how might we, those privileged to be here, must position ourselves in order to meet the demands of this challenge. So I'll start here at home. In South Africa, of every 100 matriculants who graduate with the qualification to enter higher education, 30 of them will make it in. And for those who do make it in this unforgiving system, they face the likelihood of being part of the 40% who drop out before completion. And by a stroke of luck and sheer grit, those who graduate, 1 in 3 of them will face unemployment. Sadly, a degree doesn't cut it anymore. So, what do you think happens when we scale this into the future? According to Edward Pace in his book Youthquake and the UN Population Prospectus, Africa's population is projected to exceed to over 2.5 billion people by 2050. I mean, the average age of an African would just be 25 years old. This sets Africa by some estimates to be the youngest and largest population or workforce on the planet. And while some of the other regions of the world might be growing a few gray hairs, we're becoming more youthful. And that's not just the case, but we're becoming more important to the future of the global economy. But the truth of the matter is that this youthquake is either a force for growth or a ticking time bomb for instability. And it all depends if these young people have real access to education, opportunities, and skills that enable them to contribute meaningfully to the world that they're inheriting. If not, the consequences will ripple far beyond our borders. And while rest of the world might be debating the relevance of higher education, our challenge is not whether to abandon it, but to reimagine it. Because I believe it's these very platforms and institutions that can form as platform for us to reshape the future. So, before I share my vision of how we might envision and realign higher education to our future, I want us to go back in time and share a bit of history lessons. I'll start here. How many of you know about the Manhattan Project? All right, keep your hands up. How many of you watched or heard of the movie Oppenheimer? Exactly my point. So the movie was about the Manhattan Project, which was a top secret effort in the United States during World War II, and it had one pressing challenge: to build the world's first nuclear weapon before Nazi Germany or Imperial Japan could. This was by far one of the largest collaborations between universities, government, and industry the world had ever seen, and it shaped the world as we know it today. It pulled together physicists, chemists, engineers, mathematicians, architects, and even teachers. Universities supplied the knowledge, government coordinated the direction, and industry scaled the solutions. And while the outcome might have been a weapon of mass destruction, what I want to highlight here is the sheer mobilization itself. Proof of what higher education can produce when it acts as a collaborative ecosystem. So we have to ask ourselves today, are we angry enough to question and reimagine these institutions to be able to help us to respond to the challenges we now face today? Because that same level of collaboration is what now the future demands of us. But for us to do this, we have to come back to the question that we never dared to ask in high school, and that made us seem lost whenever we did. What is the purpose of higher education? Why do I even need to go there in the first place? To do this, we also have to take some lessons from the past. In its inception, higher education was an independent space for philosophical inquiry. Literally, student societies organized their studies and hired instructors who were experts in their fields to instruct. And you can imagine if these instructors didn't meet their expectations, they were surely fired. I'm sure a number of lecturers would be unemployed nowadays if our tuition fees came with that voting right. Fast forward to the Industrial Revolution, they became engines of economic development, focused on technical skills, workforce development to meet the front lines of the factory lines across industries. Fast forward to the 20th century, post-war and post-independence era, they became gateways for upward mobility, job credentials, career security, and nation building. This is the promise that we inherited also. Today, though, higher education seems to be facing a bit of an identity crisis. It reminds me of the old Indian parable about the three blind men and the elephant. Each blind man holding a different part of the elephant and asks what this is. The one holding the trunk insists that it's a snake. The one holding the leg profusely insists that it's a tree trunk. But they're all wrong because they're all experiencing one part of a much larger whole. And this is what higher education has become, a big misunderstood elephant. Each stakeholder, governments, parents, students, industry, and even the very institutions, each experiencing and having their own perspective blind from the other. Is it to produce workers, thinkers, your career and key to success, or just an overpriced receipt to prove that you can survive 4 years of instant noodles? So we have to come back to this question and really ask ourselves and dig deep in terms of that. What has higher education really contributed to societal transformation? If you come back here at home in South Africa, campuses have always been the epicenters of resistance, from Steve Biko co-founding the South African Student Organization against the fight of apartheid, to the more recent #FieldsMustFall movement demanding free, accessible, and decolonized education. In other parts of the world, in 1969, a group of small researchers in the University of California sent the very first message across the ARPANET, an advanced research network across universities that literally laid the foundation of what we now call today the internet. In a more recent global event, COVID-19 pandemic, universities weren't just teaching online. They were the front lines of vaccine development, government advisory, building low-cost health tools, and making sure accurate information reached the public. Again and again, history tells us the same story, that when higher education acts as a collaborative ecosystem, the world changes. And this is what I believe must be the purpose of higher education. Not to prepare us for jobs that may not exist, but to enable us to collaborate, create, and once again, reshape our future. So at an institutional level, that's the shift that needs to happen. But it's not only institutions that will need to adapt, but we will too. Look, I'd love to stand here with you and envision a future where we sing and dance for the rest of our days and AI does our laundry and cooks grandma's curry, but that's not our reality, nor our future from how stark the situation is. So we have to become more. And if you look at the stats, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics in the United States, Gen Zers are predicted to work multiple jobs across different careers throughout their lifetime. So this speaks evidently to the time that we're in now. And we have to become what Emily Wapnick calls a multi-potentialite. Now, a multi-potentialite is a person who has multiple interests, skills, and pursuits across different disciplines rather than sticking to just one. And what better place to be one than in a cross-disciplinary, cross-cultural, collaborative ecosystem among some of the brightest minds our generation has to offer. The weird thing is that we're already doing this. I'm sure we've all known of that one person who attends biology class in the morning, debates the flaws of capitalism during lunchtime, runs their business through the residents' group chats in the afternoon, and still has a DJing gig to get to, but in the night. And with all of that, has to curate and create content around the day in my life for us to like and subscribe. This speaks evidently to the advice given to youth by Yuval Noah Harari, one of the most prominent historians of our time, who says, the one skill that people need to survive in the 21st century is the ability to reinvent themselves again and again. And this couldn't be more true in a world where the evolving job market is valuing the ability to adapt, learn, and integrate knowledge collaboratively across different disciplines more than just sticking to one singular knowledge paradigm. Notably, one of the most influential people to have utilized the institution as a collaborative ecosystem is no other than Steve Jobs, who even after dropping out, still attended classes that he found interesting, like calligraphy and typography, which literally formed the core design principles at Apple. Another example is Jack Ma, who, as a former English teacher at his university, rounded up some of his top students across different faculties in his apartment, directing their skills towards building Alibaba, which is now one of the largest e-commerce platforms on the planet. Right next to them is a guy called Mlondi Khoza, who are a recent architecture graduate with a passion for education, design, and technology. And with his co-founders with expertise across computer science, business economics, and design thinking, are now collaborating in building a startup focused directly at tackling this very challenge. But they're not outliers. This is Zomusa Tango, a Bachelor of Commerce student whose love for rugby led her to leading roles, from being the marketing director of the University of Cape Town's rugby team, to being the main presenter for national university sports leagues, to now even managing some of these top athletes to come out of these institutions. Another example is Vuyo Paulson, a recent chemistry graduate, but his love for photography and media led him to collaborating with his peers in building Verve magazine, a media house focused on highlighting some of the young musicians, artists, and even writers across the creative landscape. The list of examples I can give you is endless. And if I can leave you with one thing today that you can do once you leave your seats to utilize your institution as a collaborative ecosystem to better equip you for the future, is this: milk and drain every resource and opportunity at your disposal. And that's including your lectures, because you're paying for it, at least someone is. Join in running a student club or society, because there are invaluable lessons you can learn from that, collaborating in a team, raising funds, or even organizing a TEDx event. If not, partake in a club or society, because you might just be a handshake away from your next job, co-founder, mentor, or even giving your very first TED Talk. Start or support a student business. Join resident and student council to better understand the fundamentals of governance, leadership, business economics, and what it takes to sell your vision. Because it's in this very same spirit and urgency of the Manhattan Project that we must now call for, and what history has showed, and what the future now demands, is for these institutions to become more collaborative ecosystems to enable us to become multi-potentialites, to meet and exceed this challenge, and for us to once again reshape our future. I thank you.